They were promised freedom, but they found a new cage. Hello, and welcome to Hidden History with Frank Strickland. We begin, as so many stories do, in simpler times. The dawn of the Republic, when madness was often a whisper, a secret, or a burden shouldered by families. Those who couldn't cope, or found themselves in almhouses, or sometimes behind the bolted doors of private homes. Then came a woman, a quiet school teacher named Dorothea Dix. She saw the forgotten, the chained, the suffering, languishing in jails and poorhouses. And she dared to ask, is this truly how we treat our most vulnerable? Her tireless crusades, her powerful words, echoed through the state legislatures. She painted a vision, serene asylums, far from the clamor of cities, where moral treatment, kindness, routine, and purposeful activity would heal troubled minds, and America listened. By the late 19th century, nearly every state boasted its grand, often Gothic, psychiatric hospital, towering brick structures, sometimes with sprawling grounds, designed to be self-sufficient communities. They were, for a time, beacons of hope. But then, the best intentions often meet the harsh realities of progress and population. The promise of healing gave way to the grim truth of overcrowding. The trickle of patients became a flood. Funding, once generous, dwindled. These beautiful asylums, these bastions of hope, slowly, tragically, transformed into something else entirely. They became human warehouses. The early 20th century saw patient numbers explode, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands. The moral treatment replaced by routine, sometimes harsh, custodial care. Straitjackets, isolation, even lobotomies and shock therapy became disturbingly common. Desperate measures in a system overwhelmed. The outside world largely forgot about the souls in these imposing walls. But then, a new whisper began, not of hope, but of horror. Journalists, reformers, even former patients, bravely pulled back the curtain. They revealed the squalor, the neglect, the sheer inhumanity, tales of abuse, of forgotten lives, shocked the nation that had, for too long, turned a blind eye. And just as the cries for reform grew louder, science offered a glimmer of light. The 1950s, a breakthrough, the first antipsychotic drugs, Thorazine. Suddenly, the most troubling symptoms of mental illness could be managed, controlled, and sometimes even quieted. For the first time, a future outside the institution seemed possible for many. Then came the 1960s, the era of civil rights, the idea that all Americans deserved freedom, dignity, and treatment in the least restrictive setting. And a young, vibrant president, John F. Kennedy, whose own family had known the quiet tragedy of mental illness, championed the new vision, the Community Mental Health Centers Act of 1963, a promise to replace the giant, impersonal institutions with smaller, local, community-based clinics, care closer to home. The stage was set: humanitarian outrage, scientific advancement, political will, and yes, a touch of fiscal pragmatism. States realized these massive institutions were incredibly expensive to run. Federal funds for community care offered an enticing alternative. So the grand asylums, many of them, began to close. Thousands of patients, many of whom had spent decades behind those walls, were discharged. Some were united with families. Others simply released. The doors swung open. The community mental health centers, while a noble idea, were never fully funded. The network of support, the housing, the job training, the ongoing therapy, it simply wasn't there for everyone. The promise of comprehensive community care, in many cases, remained unfulfilled. And so, many of those who were meant to find freedom found themselves adrift, on the streets, in jails. The very people the movement sought to liberate often ended up in a new kind of institution, the criminal justice system, or the desolate solitude of homelessness. The pendulum had swung, perhaps too far, too fast, without the safety net promised. The history of America's mental hospitals, from noble aspiration to custodial despair, and finally, to a complex, often heartbreaking effort at reform, reminds us that even the best intentions, the journey to truly care for our most vulnerable, is a road that is constantly being built.